Let's move on to another story affecting Australians, but it's overseas still. Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles inspecting a Japanese warship at the centre of a $10 billion military deal. The Defence Minister was aboard the Mogami-class frigate ahead of a final agreement to buy the ships early next year. Let's go to our Asia correspondent Stash Butler, who's in Tokyo for us. Stash, why is Australia getting these ships?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, 10 billion Australian dollars is a lot to spend on anything. The justification that Richard Marles, Deputy Prime Minister, and the Defence Department more generally has given is that, simply put, the ANZAC-class frigates that Australia's Navy is operating right now aren't fit for purpose. That purpose, in the case of these frigates, being patrolling Australia's northern approaches and its maritime routes, because obviously maritime trade is so important to Australia. Now, given, the question of why specifically these Japanese frigates, that's one that, there's, questions surrounding that. There have been suggestions that the rival bid to this one, which these Mogami-class frigates built by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, suggestions that the rival bid was actually cheaper and that this perhaps was partly a geopolitical consideration given Australia's close ties with Japan. But on board the Mogami-class frigate that we were on just yesterday evening here in Japan, Richard Marles is stressing that over the lifetime of these ships, because they're staffed with fewer sailors as well, he expects them to be more cost-effective and essentially giving taxpayers a better bang for their buck.
This is a highly effective, cost-efficient warship which we will be able to bring into service into the Royal Australian Navy as quickly as possible.
Now, that said, the geopolitical considerations are there. Japan and Australia have been trying to shore up their friendship, particularly given they're both members of the Quad security dialogue along with the United States and India. And that is a dialogue that has been put under strain by Donald Trump's tariffs on India. And Narendra Modi also seemingly kind of, restoring some degree of ties with China to his north. He was visiting Tianjin just this week. So certainly, I think, an attempt on the part of Australia to shore up at least one side of that quadrilateral dialogue. And Richard Marles really stressing that this Mogami-class frigate deal is part of a blossoming, in his words, of that relationship.
The selection of the Mogami-class frigates as the general-purpose frigate for the Royal Australian Navy is genuinely a milestone moment in the bilateral relationship between Australia and Japan.
Now, given that Richard Marles is also the Defence Minister, I put to him the news that you were just covering there with Annalise about the renaming of the Department of Defence in the United States and asked him whether Australia might do the same. Here was his response.
Look, ultimately that is a matter for the United States. We have the Department of Defence, we've had so for a long time, we've got no plans to change.
Now, overall, I think from this trip from Japan, I think both ministers will come away pleased with what they've achieved. Certainly the language we've seen here from both sides has been very effusive, very praising of one another, and this is certainly something they want to take forward. It's a significant 50-year anniversary of ties coming up next year that they'll be building already towards, Alex.
Stash, good on you for asking that question, and I applaud Richard Marles for keeping a relatively straight face in the answer to it. Stash Butler there in Tokyo. More from Stash later in the morning.